Hello and welcome to Between the 20s. I'm Amer, Bryce Weisholtz, and Michael Vetter coming at you with special guests today, becoming a regular at this point. Division III Khalil Mack, Ben Christensen. Ben, how are you doing?
Doing good, Mike. Doing good.
That's good. You look stellar. You look like you're ready for another podcast Between the 20s. Very exciting.
I'm excited.
You are excited. That's okay.
I'm very excited.
Your exuberance shows quite clearly. Amer, how are you doing up there in Massachusetts?
Dude, I'm good. It's getting warm, but we're still inside. So, positives, negatives. At least we're almost done with school. So,
that just sounds like two positives to me.
All right,
Bryce, Bryce, how are you?
I'm good. It's going to be raining all weekend here, so Amer. I have at least cause to stay inside, but rocking the Cubs out with the Yankees logos behind me, so we're feeling all the fandom today.
Very confused fan going on there. And today we are going to continue our top 5 series, breaking down the top 5 wide receivers of all time. So it's going to be a good list. We're going to have a lot of fun here. Hopefully won't get too mad at each other. But
hopefully we will.
Lead off to Ben to start and kick off our list.
There was a lot of contention on my list right before this because I wanted to keep this guy off the list. I wanted to put Calvin Johnson at my number 5, but I couldn't. Too short of a career. He quit just a little too early. However, my number 5 is T.O. Almost 16,000 receiving yards, 153 touchdowns, 6 Pro Bowls. Dude was a little dramatic at times, but he was an all-timer. T.O. is my number 5.
Very good. Very good selection. Bryce, how about you?
I had a lot of guys contending for this. Receivers were actually, I don't know about you guys, for me, it was harder than I expected. Don't have a lot of guys leading the league in receiving all the time other than like Jerry Rice, who of course was Jerry Rice.
Yeah.
I don't know how much I feel about or how good I feel about or how much stock I put into receiving touchdowns, which is so random. So for me, my decisions very much came down to Pro Bowls and All-Pros designations, along with consistency in receiving yards. You have a lot of guys that have one-year wonders that could put up crazy numbers. If you're putting up consistent numbers throughout your career, I like you for that. And that is why all 5 of my guys are averaging 1,000 yards over their careers. And with that, my number 5 was the guy that Ben just missed, Calvin Johnson. He was short. He only had 11,000 career receiving yards, by far the lowest on my list. But he did that in 9 years. He set the single-season receiving yard record. And a big bonus for me, I think, when thinking about Calvin Johnson, other than the fact that he might be the most imposing and physical receiver to ever grace the football field, is that for the first half of his career, he played with Joey Harrington. Like, come on. He was able to do this with subpar quarterback play, at least at the beginning, and early Matthew Stafford. Just the highlights. And even in those 9 seasons, 6 Pro Bowls and 3 first-team All-Pro shouts. For me, Calvin Johnson was the epitome of athletic freak at the receiver position, putting up just monster seasons.
Interesting. So we do have contention already.
Yeah.
Bryce, I hate to break it to you, also still possible to average over 1,000 yards in just a few good seasons.
It's true.
Well, statistics. We know how I feel about statistics.
Bryce, if I flip a coin and it's heads, what's the probability?
Next one's gotta be tails. 100% tails on the next one, right, Bryce?
Oh, every time. I mean, Ben and I play a lot of blackjack together. We can tell you that's how stats work.
How it works.
Enough about Bryce's probability theory. Amer, who do you have at your number 5 spot?
I am here to break this tie, and I'm going with Bryce on this one. I'm going Calvin Johnson at number 5. The eye test on this guy was just next level. His peak, I mean, he has the most yards in a single season. He's at 1,964, which is crazy. Just starting off, and then he's just a beast. Like Bryce said, he's like 6'5". He ran like a sub 4.3. This guy is just crazy, and it's too bad you bring a lot of comparisons between him and Barry Sanders. Terrible organization, Lions, and they kind of bailed out early, for better or for worse. But I just think he was too good to leave off. He was awesome. Just one guy actually that I was going to put in my number 5 spot that you guys are not going to like. I was really close to putting this guy on. He's honorable mention. He's just missed the cut is actually Antonio Brown.
Oh,
And he has this – if you look at his stats, same yards and almost identical touchdowns to Calvin Johnson. He has had more 100 reception seasons. He actually had Antonio Brown had a stretch of 6 straight seasons of 1,250-plus yards, 1,250-plus yards and 100 receptions, 6 in a row. We hadn't seen that kind of consistency since, I don't know, Randy Moss or even before that. So I almost put him on, but he just missed the cut for some pretty obvious reasons.
in fairness, I initially scoffed at that, but if he actually played a couple more seasons, like that was my thing with Calvin. It's like it's hard to put a guy in your top 5 for what he could have done all the time. Kind of like me with Barry last week. I knocked him a couple places. Your guys were second because he didn't play like the entire thing that like everyone else did. So if Antonio played a little more, if Calvin played a little more, frankly, they'd probably be in my top 5 as well.
Yeah, I mean, Antonio Brown, like I said, almost identical stats to Calvin Johnson. Antonio Brown's actually got more Pro Bowls and All Pros than Calvin Johnson, which is a little bit weird to think about, but just missed the cut.
You want to break this tie for number 5?
No, it's just typical for this. I disagree with everybody. I'm going with Chris Carter here.
Okay.
I like that one.
There are a few reasons to leave him off the list. I'll start with that one. First, he's only 12th all-time in receiving yards, but he is 4th in receiving touchdowns, so I thought that was a very good nod. And he does get those kind of Pro Bowl, all-pro selections. He's selected to the 4th most Pro Bowls or tied for 4th most Pro Bowls of receivers of all time. So I thought he was a very good nod. And if you look at Bryce's accolade chart, Walter Payton, Man of the Year, can't go wrong with the character clause. You saw me go by Offensive Player of the Year for running backs. Maybe we'll go Walter Payton Award for the wide receivers, an award named after a running back. That seems to make sense for me. But with that, we'll go on to our number 4 slot.
I like that one.
So we have a little bit of contention, but I think in general we're kind of feeling the flow. And Amer, will let you start this one off.
Oh, me. Okay. I'm going to go in the exact opposite direction as I went last time in terms of how I value my players. I'm going to go with Larry Fitzgerald. He's just always the same. He's got 17,000 yards, second most in NFL history. Right behind, of course, Jerry Rice, which is awesome. This guy's been playing since 2004. We're in 2020. He's playing 16 years. With what has been a revolving door at quarterback. He's made a Super Bowl. I don't think that's necessarily a compiler. I'm sure he had Kurt Warner and Carson Palmer, but a lot of his quarterbacks have been definitely subpar, to say the least. But he's just awesome. If you want to talk about character clause, then Larry Fitzgerald definitely gets the check mark for that. His consistency is just too good to leave off this list. And although he hasn't really ever been, maybe you could argue a couple years in the middle, but he's never really been the guy, the best wide receiver in football, undoubtedly. I still think he's definitely got to make this list just for playing so long and racking up so many yards.
Definitely. Ben, you agree?
I like Larry. I like Larry more than Amer likes Larry.
Let's not spoil the show here, Ben. Come on, people. People got to stay stuck in.
All right. I like Larry. He's a great guy. He's a personal friend of mine, as you all know. His biggest knock kind of like Amer that he's just kind of stayed the same. Like that's been his.
Should rank very well for Bryce then.
Very well for Bryce. My number 4, however, I went way back. I went to Don Hutson.
Oh, man.
1935 to
1945.
11 seasons, 7,991 yards, 99 touchdowns, 4 Pro Bowls, 8 first-team All-Pros. I don't know how that works or if that's actually correct, but this was a time when we just learned how to throw the ball. People probably didn't even know how to throw a tight spiral at the time. The forward pass was just invented, and this guy tore it up. He led the league in receiving 7 times. 7 out of his 11 season, he led. Not that stats – I think that the stat of leading the league in receiving yards could be negligible if you do it once or twice, but if you do it 7 times, you are a monster of that era. The only other person comparable to that is Jerry Rice. However, his overall stats, the yards aren't great, touchdowns aren't bad, so he's still number 4. But as you can adjust for era, this guy's an all-time great.
Definitely. I got to be honest. I don't know how many preliminary lists he made.
He's deep in the book, back in the Bible, all the way back then.
A New Testament though, it's not that old. Bryce, how are you? How is your third or fourth best wide receiver of all time?
So, just a disclaimer first. Don
Oh
Hudson
boy.
would have had this spot, but I elected to keep him off of my consideration for this. I just think that the era adjustment here is too big, right? He made 8 first-team All-Pros, but there were, 5 guys catching the ball regularly? He was the first guy to go over 1,000 yards. He's a great receiver, started to change the game back in the 30s and 40s. It was just so different. I felt that I couldn't do an accurate comparison. That was just a personal thing. He would have had this spot. But the man that does get this spot, and this was between 4 and 5, I was deciding how to go. It's the ultimate – for me, it was the ultimate, do you go longevity or do you go peak? And I lean towards longevity, and I'm also going to go with Larry Fitzgerald. Amer, you said everything just perfectly. He played 1 season with Kevin Cobb as a starting quarterback, and he still pulled off, I believe it was 950 yards that season. He came in the league before Calvin Johnson, and he's still in the league now after Calvin Johnson has been long gone. 1,000-yard seasons everywhere. But for me, one of the things that stands out for Larry Fitzgerald, 11 Pro Bowls in 16 seasons. And across those 16 seasons, he's played 16 games 14 times. He does not leave the field. He's going to be part of the reason Christian Kirk takes a step forward this season if he does. And, of course, DeAndre Hopkins is there too. Fitzy, second most receiving yards all time. He's got 120 receiving touchdowns. But the 11 Pro Bowls in 16 seasons just speaks to his unmitigated consistency, along with over 1,000 yards on average, encompassing 17,000 yards in 16 years.
Second most yards of all time, I believe.
Yes. Yep. Only behind Jerry.
All right. So
Mike, what's up?
with my number 4, I'm going to go with Randy Moss.
Ooh.
Whoa.
Ooh.
I've decided to slide Randy Moss into here. I mean, when you look at the numbers, it's not inconceivable. He has the second most touchdowns of all time, 6 Pro Bowl and 4 All-Pro selections. And this is over a relatively, he's not necessarily a compiler, but he did play in the league for 15 years. So I think it shows that he was, an established member of the league and very good while he was doing it. But yet he had a lot of touchdown upside for Randy Moss.
I will never understand how playing a long time is a bad thing in Mike's mind. I'm just
No, it's not a bad. There's compile. No, I'm saying that it's not like a sort of like a flame out of a few very good seasons of just a very good play and then just nothing, like a short 5-year career. But it shows a good amount of consistency without having quite as long of a career as Larry Fitzgerald. By a few years, but so that's my 3, or excuse me, that's my 4. But now we're heading on to number 3. Ben, I'll let you kick this one off.
My 3 is you just mentioned Randy Moss.
Oh, how about that? I read your mind.
When Randy was with Brady that one year, that was incredible. Had on my fantasy team, dude lit it up. Every game. Dude is a freak. He just like people say Kobe when they shoot, people say you got Moss when you get Moss. And everyone knows exactly what you're talking about. Frankly, dude was like Calvin Johnson that played more. I mean, not exactly the same, not as like maybe physical, but like big body. Dude was gonna just get the ball over you. Like you could see like they had similar careers in terms of just overall domination at their peaks, and like it was a pretty lengthy peak as well.
All right, definitely. Amer, what do you say?
I'm gonna go with Terrell Owens. He's been mentioned by Ben at number 5. The debate always seems to be Terrell Owens versus Randy Moss. And as you can see, I like Terrell Owens just a little bit worse. Their stats are almost
spoiling the show.
Stats are, well, I haven't mentioned Randy Moss yet, so I hope you know that he's coming eventually. I mean, their stats are almost identical. It's kind of crazy how close they are. 3 touchdowns separate them, and like 700 yards separates them over their entire careers, which is crazy. They played the same number of years. It's kind of uncanny how close they are. But I don't know. I just think the eye test. Oh man, big one, Mike. Big one. I think the eye test for me is what really differentiates these two. I think Terrell Owens, obviously, he was great. He was a speedster. He had a ton of heart as he, like in the Super Bowl. He played with a broken leg. He just got almost 150 yards in that Super Bowl for the Eagles. So he played his heart out. But I don't know. I just don't think he's not quite on that Randy Moss level. I got Terrell Owens at 3.
Not quite, by about 700 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, very close.
All right, Bryce. Who do you have at 3?
I have Randy Moss at 3. So I'm with Ben on this one. Initially, I had him penciled in as number 2 for sure. Then I took a look at the stats, and Amer, you mentioned it, between him and T.O. Randy Moss's stats are just like they're the same as T.O. for all intents and purposes. The biggest differentiators are going to be Randy has the single season receiving touchdown record, and T.O. has one more first team All-Pro. To me, Randy Moss just coming in with fewer yards, and you could attribute the receiving touchdowns record to Brady if you want. Obviously, it's both of them, but he did do that with Brady in 2009, I think. And he did win Rookie of the Year in 1998. Randy Moss, undoubtedly, phenomenal receiver, absolutely fantastic receiver. Came in and silenced all his doubters, too. He slid all the way to the mid-20s in his draft year in 98 to the Vikings when he really should have been a top 5 pick in that draft. He silenced everybody, and he did it really well for a long time. 15,000 yards, no matter what you're doing something right. Randy Moss is number 3 on my list.
And I'm going to disagree with everybody and put Terrell Owens in front of Randy Moss at number 3.
I had him at 3, Mike. We agree on this one.
No, but you have Randy Moss ahead.
But I have Randy Moss ahead.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just saying that in comparing those two, I still disagree with everybody. That's just if you look at the two. Terrell Owens got that one more All-Pro. It's a first-team All-Pro.
Ridiculous.
And I thought that's a better differentiator because you can put one more season out there where you're, a elite wide receiver. That I think makes the difference for me.
Sure, Mike. That's a good point.
Oh, thanks, man. So now we're gonna move on to number 2, and we'll kick it back to Bryce.
My number 2, the guy that we've now been talking about for a while here, is T.O. Terrell Owens.
Look at that.
He
agrees with you.
Almost 16,000 yards. I just think T.O. Looking at the stats, I had him as number 3. I really flipped these guys when I looked at everything that was going on. He does have that first team All-Pro extra, which is huge for T.O.
Huge.
A big thing.
It's huge.
A big thing that I liked about him too is that Randy Moss, certainly they both played for 5 teams, but T.O. did his damage with such different organizations, playing with Philly and Dallas, Buffalo, Cincinnati, and starting his career in San Francisco. He was able to take his game wherever he went, no matter who he played with. And he had 16,000 yards and over 150 receiving, nearly 16,000 yards and over 150 receiving touchdowns to show for it. T.O., for all of his swagger, was a great receiver. He slides as number 2 all-time on my list.
How about your list, Ben?
One of the things I always like to try to stay consistent with when I'm ranking is you don't want to give people rankings for what they could have done if they like this guy had a bad quarterback. If he had a good quarterback, he'd be here. Or this guy retired early, like Barry and Calvin Johnson. They retired a little early. I was going to reward them for not playing those years out. That being said, Larry Fitzgerald, who had possibly the worst quarterback play over his 16 years, not only did he show, hey, I had terrible quarterbacks, but he still is number 2 all-time receiving yards with the worst quarterback staff possible. As I said, he's very consistent. He's not more up and down. But on top of just being consistent, still getting the receiving yards, the touchdown, he probably couldn't help that one with the poor quarterback play. But I'm sure you guys have heard this stat. He has more tackles than dropped passes in his career. He does the Mr. Dependable. He's always there. He's going to get you 1,000 yards. He's not going to drop the ball. if you could have paired this guy up with any type of talent at quarterback throughout his prime of his career, this guy could have maybe, I'll say it, maybe gotten close to Jerry. He might have.
Wow.
Nothing wrong with that statement, in my opinion.
No,
He's
for sure.
dude, he's got 4 seasons less than Jerry. Like, if you give him another 4, like on his like career average, he'd be at like 21,000 yards. So that's Larry's my number 2.
He's great.
Wow.
Ben, to your drops point is another stat that I thought was cool. The year the Broncos went to the Super Bowl, 2015, I think, Demaryius Thomas had 22 drops that season. Between 2004 and that season, Larry Fitzgerald had 22 drops,
Just
which is
Dude,
absurd.
he's awesome.
unbelievable.
What a guy.
Who do you have at number 2 on there? Big surprise.
Guys, you know who I'm putting here. I'm going with Randy Moss. This guy's just got the swagger. You guys have said it already. 15,000 yards, 156 touchdowns over his career. This guy was just a beast. Physical specimen. He ran a 4.24. He's like 6'4". That's crazy fast. That is almost record-setting speed at the wide receiver position. It's awesome. He was just so good for so many years. He had a couple down seasons in Oakland, but it's black hole. Happens to everyone. And then he came back kind of reignited with the Patriots. And this guy was just so good. Just eye test. This guy could grab it from anywhere. He was just such a physically dominant guy. And just the difference, I think, between him and T.O. is I think it's quarterback play. If you look at Terrell Owens, he played with some pretty good quarterbacks. I mean, early in his career, he started off with Steve Young. Like, hard to get better than that, especially early. And then later in T.O.'s career, he went on to Donovan McNabb, who brought him to a Super Bowl, whereas Randy Moss, he had 1 season with Tom Brady, 1.5 seasons, I guess. And he had some other questionable guys. Of course, like Dante Culpepper and Randall Cunningham are good, but I don't think they're on that same level as Steve Young. So that's kind of where I split hairs here. I just think Randy Moss is just so good. If you just watch him play, you think like, oh, man, that guy's awesome.
I'm actually going to agree with Ben in my number 2 spot. Larry Fitzgerald, it is just unprecedented longevity, sort of. Not unprecedented, but
Is he not a
just such
compiler,
great
Mike?
You can debate, but I mean, it's hard to debate with 11 All-Pro selections, second all time in yards. There are some holes.
11 Pro Bowls, Mike, just 1 All-Pro.
11 Pro Bowls, yes, exactly. 1 All-Pro and low amount of touchdowns, but I think comparable to everybody else that we're mentioning here. But to be fair, as Ben said and has been stressed throughout the show, I think the quarterback play more than makes up for kind of that difference. So Larry Fitzgerald is my number 2, and that's the show, I think, right? I mean, is it worth going about number 1, or
I don't know.
Everyone
Mike,
gets 10 seconds to gush about number 1.
Mike, with you, anything's possible. You might put, I don't know.
I like that guy that Ben mentioned. I was shuffling my list after Mr. 1930s.
Don Hudson. Mike's putting Mike elevating Don Hudson to the 1 right now.
All right, Ben, you show a lot of passion. Who do you have at number 1?
Jerry. I'm not going to say his last name. We all know he's Jerry. 20 seasons, almost 23,000 yards, almost 200 touchdowns. Kind of makes me mad he didn't get to 23,200 touchdowns. That'd be kind of cool. Career yards leader, touchdown leader, 10 first-team All-Pros. Dude is just – he's number 1, clear-cut.
Definitely. Bryce?
It's Jerry Rice, and it's no debate. This should be our first consensus. I mean, Ben said everything. 10 first-team All-Pros is absurd. He is the only receiver that at least we were considering on the sheet here to win an Offensive Player of the Year, and he did twice in 1987 and 1993. Led the league in receiving 6 times. Once you get it above like 3 or 4, then you know you did something right. Jerry Rice did a lot right and did it with two great quarterbacks, Joe Montana and Steve Young, but still made it work with them both.
Definitely. Amer?
Guys, agreed, 100%. This guy's in the conversation for football GOAT across all positions. He's got a strong case for being the best football player of all time. This guy's awesome. It's like it's Jerry and everybody else. The difference in 5,000 yards between him and the next guy is just insane. 40 touchdowns as well. It's crazy. I mean, not much to say. This guy was just awesome. I mean, you thought he played all the way back, and then you realize he played when we were alive in 2004. So this guy's longevity is insane. And he backed it up. He was always the best wide receiver in the league, as shown by his 10 first-team All-Pros and 13 Pro Bowls. This guy was he was too good.
It's true. It's true. And I believe it or not, I agree with everybody too. How about that?
Look at that. First consensus on the top
Wow.
fives.
Number one, Jerry Rice. It's just hard to debate. It's hard to debate it. Number one in touchdowns. Also, 3 Super Bowls, 10 All-Pro selections, and 13 Pro Bowls, as you guys said. So Jerry Rice, number one. And that's it for our top 5 wide receiver ranking. And this has been Between the 20s. We will see you next time.
You guys can't forget that Jerry Rice also dual sport athlete. He's got 2 champions. Well, 2 different sports he has championships in.